Okay, so in this video, we're actually going to focus on site structures. What is the right site structure when you look at the three migration strategies from on-prem SharePoint to SharePoint Online? When you're going to a full modern experience in SharePoint Online, and if you end up like this portal here, where you have a multi-hub scenario, or maybe you have a requirement to where you have several portals that make up the intranet, but each one of them may have their own theme or branding. What are some of the things to consider when migrating on-prem to the cloud and creating that multi-hub strategy? The same is true for the other two strategies, the hybrid strategy as well as the incremental. What are some of the site structure things to consider when you're migrating from on-prem to the cloud? A lot to unpack here. Pretty meaty video, but take your time, chop it up, make sure you complete it to the end. There's a lot of nuggets here. Let's get started. Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about the site structure for the three SharePoint migration strategies that we outlined in the previous video. So just a quick recap on the three migration strategies. You're going to have the full migration, meaning that you're going to totally deplete your on-prem footprint, get everything in the cloud, and you're going to do that to the modern SharePoint, right? You're going to have, not only are you going to migrate everything from on-prem to the cloud, you're going to minimize zero or minimum to zero classic sites once you're in the cloud. That's going to be the full migration. The next one is going to be what we call the hybrid migration strategy. And just again, to recap with the hybrid is going to be you're migrating, again, everything from on-prem to the cloud, but now you're going in the fork in the road where you're migrating some content to classic SharePoint Online and the other content to modern SharePoint Online, with the understanding that in the future, you will eventually get all your classic SharePoint over to the modern and really remove classic from your technology profile from a SharePoint Online perspective. And then the final one would be what we call the incremental. And again, just to recap, if you just now jumping into this video, by the way, and and these three strategies are new to you, go back to the previous video in this particular series just to get caught up with the understanding, so that way we can level set and move forward. But the third one is going to be incremental. And with the incremental, this is going to be, I'm not migrating everything from the cloud, from on-prem to the cloud. I'm going to do this in a incremental or wave fashion, where phase one, I'm taking this many site collections, phase two, this many site collections, phase three, this many, and I keep iterating through that in an incremental way to get everything eventually off of on-prem into the cloud. But the goal is to, as I'm migrating to the cloud, since I'm taking my time and I'm chunking this up into different waves or segments, I'm going to modern SharePoint. I'm not very minimal, if any, online SharePoint Online classic footprints. So the question is, what does the site structure and what does the site collection mix looks like for each one of these three? And that's what we're going to focus on this particular video. Now, for modern SharePoint, for the full migration, we want to go all in, right? So in our online footprint, our on-prem footprint, if we have several site collections that are deep hierarchical structure, we're migrating those over to the modern SharePoint, and we're going to follow the Microsoft guidelines and best practices for modern SharePoint, where we're going flat. And what does that mean? So that means that a lot of these subsites that we have here will be promoted to site collections. The root site collection ideally would be the new hub site collection, where it established the hub network, and then all of our subs would then eventually just migrate up to the respective modern site collections in the cloud, right? So, and again, this is just a recap of what we talked about in depth in the previous video. So if you're new to this concept and this is your first time looking at it, you probably want to pause this video, go to the previous, and then snap back. Now, what does that mean in the SharePoint admin? In the SharePoint admin is where we actually create these site collections. Now, in the SharePoint admin, when you go to create a site, I think you really have three avenues that you're going to go down. You're either going to create a modern site using the communication site template, a modern site using the team template, or you're going to click in other options and create a classic site using some of the legacy or the retro type templates. Now, one of the things to keep in mind, a lot of people mix this concept up. Just because you're going classic site collection, meaning that the inner workings and the guts, the site definition, and all the things that are under the hood are classic, not rebuilt from the ground up modern, that's the big difference. You're still going to have classic pages or classic experiences, which are lists and libraries, even under, modern pages, modern list experience, modern library experience, even though you're under the classic site collection, right? So just understand that, because I think that's going to be key, especially when you try to figure out the right balance with the experience as your end user. Start with a modern internet homepage, a modern news article, and then all of a sudden click a link and they flip over to this classic experience. Now, for a full migration where we're going straight modern, is really simple. You're really just going to toggle between these two. And the difference between these two is that from a UI perspective, the team template is going to create the navigation on the left, where the communication site template is going to create the navigation at the top, the local navigation, in addition to your global navigation, right? So let me create a couple of sites and see. So what we're going to do for this one, for all three of these, let's just use these different high-level site or high-level departments. So we're going to have the main intranet, right? We're going to have an HR department site, an IT department site, a marketing department site, a digital department site, and then we're going to have pages for the help desk or help desk requests, and a page for a central location for all of our forms and templates, right? Most intranets really going to have a profile, really some flavor of these. So this is going to be our starting point. Okay, for full modern site, imagine what we're going to have on-prem. Our intranet obviously will be the root web of our main site collection, right? Understand that you can have more than one site collection on your on-prem footprint. So in our main site collection, we're going to have the intranet. A subsite under there is going to be HR. A subsite under the intranet site collection will be IT. Another subsite will be marketing. But digital on-prem had its own site collection on-prem. So this is going to be digital, right? So they actually have, because this was massive, right? You know, digital is usually a combination or a correlation or a combination of both IT and marketing coming together and forming this whole new concept of digital, right? So digital had its own site collection, and then within the subsites, they broke off digital into different sub-departments. And help desk is going to be a page off of the main site collection, and forms and templates was a page or a collage off of the main site collection. So let's just label this main site collection intranet. And usually this is like, you know, we like to call it the root site collection, because it's the #1 site collection that has usually like the domain name / that's where it starts. That's the root site collection. And then digital would be like domain / whatever managed path that you may have. Let's just call it sites / digital will be the starting point for this one. Okay, so that's our baseline for all three of these. And we'll just kind of see, like, from the three strategies and the three approaches, how does that mix with our modern site moving forward. Okay, let's start with the modern strategy. So with the modern strategy, what we're going to do in the SharePoint admin is that main front door, 99% of the time, is a communication site. And most of that's because you get the full width, the design, the UI is pretty nice. So let's just call this the Sean intranet, just for the sake of this video. Now, with all of these, when you're creating the intranet or when you're creating a site collection, you really want to pause and take a step back and figure out a naming convention for your URLs. And this is where this is more of a reaction, especially once we get involved and we really start to coach on the best practices, coach on some of the gotchas that come along the way. And then also once the SharePoint admins and architects realize that the flexibility we have with managed paths on-prem, we don't have that same flexibility in the cloud. On the managed path in the cloud, you really only have two, and they're out of the box. There's /sites and /teams. Whereas before, we can create what we wanted where it makes sense for the organization or where it makes sense for our site strategy and site structure that we had on-prem. But in cloud, you only have two. So what does that mean? That means that these two not only service the site collections that are used for the intranet, they're also used for any site collection created in the tenant. We all know that Microsoft Teams actually use SharePoint sites to store the files within a Microsoft team, right? So those by default are going to use one of these managed paths. And you can configure if you want to force all your teams to use /teams as a managed path or have the default, which is /sites. That's something you can configure in a different area within the SharePoint admin. Now, because we only have these two, we have to get very creative on how we want to prefix the URLs for the ones that are part of our intranet. Now, there's one or two ways that you can do this. One way would be, this is an intranet, so I'm gonna just prefix everything with int, or ITR, right? Which is just kind of like short nomenclature for intranet. But on the second option you have is that most intranets within the organization have a name. Like there's a branded name that says go here for our internal website. And I've seen these names all over the place. So usually if you're going to create, if your intranet has a name, come up with, and I recommend staying within 3 characters or less as your prefix, but every site collection associated to your intranet should have that prefix. So I may do something, let's just call this a Deshaun intranet. So I'm gonna prefix all of these with DI. Right, so once I have DI, now I'm gonna just go ahead and put intranet, because this is gonna be my main. And then again, if you're supporting multilingual, one of the breaths of fresh air that we have is that all the language packs are already installed and they're available for every site collection provisioning process. And it's not like what we're experienced with on-prem, whereas that you had to put some forethought in your language packs, get those pre-installed before you create a site collection and then make a language within that language pack your primary language. So here we have all of the languages available to us, but to keep things simple and to prevent me from having to translate things and things like that, we're gonna go with English. And then, and again, the time zone is important. What is the base time zone for this intranet? Understanding that views and some other experiences will look at this time zone and not necessarily convert to the current user's time zone. So whatever the majority of your users who are using this site, this will be the time zone for them. So for our intents and purposes, I'm gonna go ahead and select Eastern as the default time zone. I'm okay with the 25 terabytes as being the default storage limit, and then I'll just go ahead and create. Right? So now I have the intranet. We can go ahead and take a look at this quickly. Okay, I created this with my admin account. I didn't give my admin account access, so let me do manage admin. Go ahead and add in my admin user account. Now I can click on this and I should be able to see this particular site. Okay, so once I have this site created, this is my default layout that every site will receive. And again, 2 things to point out here. One, this main intranet, the first site collection I create, that's going to be the front door of my new intranet. I usually want to make this my hub site as well. So I have to go back into the SharePoint admin and add that extra attribute for this particular site collection. And let me pause there, because sometimes when you hear the term hub navigation or hub site or hub network, you think of it as a different entity in addition to the site collections. And in actuality, it's a characteristic or a property being flagged or set for a site collection. So in Sure, a hub network or a hub site is nothing but a site collection that's going to be like the main, or almost like, oh, a very good example of this would be the root web in the site collection as we know it, for those of us who's been working with classic SharePoint for a while, right? So we understand that a site collection had like a root web that was at the tippy top, and then under that you had all your subsites. This is exactly the same concept for your hub. It's going to be like, out of all these flat site collections, and you may have 20, 40, 50 wide, out of all those 50 site collections, which one is going to be the entry point of this hub network? And that's where things will start when you're looking at the hub. So in short, it can be any one of those 50. I may select site collection 4 as the hub, go into the SharePoint admin, give it the characteristics needed, make it a hub, and then over time that may change. It was like, no, you know what? 4 is not it anymore. Now it's site collection 9. Okay, turn it off for 4, turn it on for 9, reassociate all my site collections, and now 9 is my entry point for the hub. It's really that simple. It's not a separate site. It's not a separate entity. It's not a separate thing that we need to account for. It's really just a site collection with a certain attribute. So with that, let me go into the SharePoint admin, and now I have the Sean intranet. Go ahead and select hub and say register this site as a hub. And as you can see, I can make that for any one of the site collections I have in the tenant. So I'm selecting the Sean the Sean intranet. Once that's done, I can go back to the intranet, and the two things that happen for me. One, I got this global navigation that's going to be available for every site collection that's associated to the hub. I can, and again, this is super flexible. You can add sites to the hub. You can remove sites from the hub. You can remove a site from hub A and associate it to hub B. That's simple. Nothing breaks within that site collection. The URLs remain the same. The bookmarks to that site collection remain the same. And all the underpinnings remain the same, which is a beautiful thing. And again, this is the piece that kind of get a lot of SharePoint architects and a lot of SharePoint admins tripped up, because it's like this superficial layer that sits on top of everything. It's almost like virtual. It's like this virtual layer that sits on top of everything. And how we disconnect and associate and create that is actually a breath of fresh air and give us a lot of flexibility and allow us to scale. So now that I gave this particular site collection the hub characteristic, I have this global navigation at the top. Here I can add links. I can add any link that I want and link this to whatever I want. I'm going to just, as an example, link this guy to itself, right? Let me clear this out, and let's just do test link, Deshaun. Go ahead and click OK here. And then here we go. We're ready to rock and roll. The other thing that I get by turning on the hub characteristic for this particular site collection is now when I go into the gear icon for this site collection and this site collection only within the hub, I get another set of settings that are called my hub settings. And in my hub settings, I'm going to be able to define the logo for the hub. I can change the hub name, which is associated for this. I can show or hide the hub name in the navigation. I can require approval for anybody who's trying to associate their sites to the hub, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot there. Again, just understand that there's another set of settings for the site collection with the hub characteristic that gets enabled when you turn it on. If I turn this hub characteristic off for this site collection, the navigation goes away for this site collection. And when I go into the gear icon, that hub setting option goes away for this site collection. And again, it just shows you the flexibility on how you can turn things on or off as you move forward. All right. So this is going to serve as the main purpose of our modern site structure. The good news is that whole entry point that I create in the hub network that I establish is going to be the same strategy regardless if you're doing a full modern migration strategy, a hybrid migration strategy, or incremental migration strategy. You usually start with the front door, and 99.5% of the time, that's going to be a modern front door to really kind of set the stage to say, this is what we're about to do as an organization. This is the new look of the intranet for the organization. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. Now, the next thing I want to do is create these HR, IT, marketing, and digital sites. Now, let's do this just for kicks and giggles, because I want to show you different concepts that you may run into as you're planning your migration strategy. I'm going to make a HR, which is a sub, IT, which is a sub, marketing, which is a sub. I'm going to go ahead and make those individual site collections. And this is where, doing our migration strategy, we're going to go from a sub site on-prem to a modern site collection in the cloud, okay? And then for digital, I'm going to actually make digital another hub site. And now you get to see the difference between, okay, what is that experience to the end user when I have one intranet hub, a hub for the intranet, and a separate hub for the digital portal, right? And how would those two kind of play together? Okay, so let me go ahead and crank these out. Okay, so based off of our very simple layout and intranet structure for intranet, HR, IT, marketing, and digital, and then we're going to have pages dedicated to help desk and forms and templates. This is what I built out for a full migration strategy that we want to build out, right? So basically for each one of these, I created a site collection. You will notice that my managed property toggles between sites and teams, only because in this particular tenant, I told it that anytime I use the team template to use the team's managed path, else use the site's managed path. That's neither here or there. That's just something that happened out of the box, but neither here or there. But the key thing to look at is that my hub section strategy or configuration here. My main intranet is going to be the gateway to the hub, and then human resources, IT, and all these are just flat intranets. Now, we do want to make digital its own hub, so let's go ahead and make that change here, where I go into hub and just say register this as a hub, and I'm going to just call this the DC Digital Hub, right? And just go ahead and save that. Now for marketing, IT, and HR, if I click to these sites, these are just standard sites. They're very standard modern site collections. Some of them have the Teams template. Some of these, as you can see, in marketing are using the communication template. And that's a good call out, right? You can mix and match the two for these particular site collections. As of right now, until Microsoft, and at the time of this video, because depending on when you watch this video, Microsoft will come up with the capability that if I'm creating a site collection using a team template, I can move the navigation from the left to the top. But as of right now, from a user experience, only the communication template will allow me to put the navigation, the local navigation at the top, whereas the teams will put the navigation on the left. But in the future, Microsoft will allow me to move that navigation from left to top or top to left, right? Now, here, what I want to do is if I go into HR, I actually want to associate HR to my intranet, my DI intranet template. So if I go to Deshaun intranet, I want to associate that one there. The same for information technology. I want to associate that to the Deshaun intranet. And what does that mean when I do that? So now if I go into IT, you will notice that I keep my information technology, I keep my local navigation here, but then because I associate to the Deshaun intranet, I inherit that global navigation that I can build out here. And this could be a nice mega menu navigation, or it could just be a simple cascading navigation. But in the end, it's going to be that stitch that says this site collection is associated to this hub. Here's the navigation for the hub, right? And that's one of the key takeaways. Not only will this site take on the hub navigation or the global navigation associated to the hub, it will also take on the look and feel or the theme. Right now it's fighting with this red, but over time, if you give it 5-7 minutes, this would then look like the same blue theme, or I can tell, yeah, it looks like the teal theme that's associated with the hub. And then if I go into the gear icon and then change the look, again, I'm making this change on the site collection that is designated as the hub site collection. And if I change the theme here, now what's going to happen, I can go ahead and make everything orange. Let's do an orange with a gray accent. All my site collections associated to this hub would then take on that theme, right? That's one of the inheriting pieces that they have. So they inherit the look and feel. And again, this just takes time. They inherit the global navigation. and they also inherit the scope, the search scope. So if I'm on the Deshaun intranet, and if I search on, let's just say technology, right? What it's going to do is execute that search against all the sites within that hub network. And if I want to broaden it out to search on that technology for all the sites within the entire tenant, then I will hit that breadcrumb. But again, that's one of the key benefits of establishing this hub. Now, for the Deshaun DC Digital, this is going to be its own hub, and it can have its look and feel that is independent of the main intranet hub navigation. So here I want for digital, because these are the cool kits on the block, I want to go ahead and change the look and feel to more of a dark theme. So let's just go with this dark blue theme here. And I have like a navy main color, and let's just do a purple accent color. Now this is going to be my own look and feel. Now all of my site collections associated to this digital hub network will take on this look and feel. Now the biggest question is going to be, especially with a full modern navigation, because everything's modern, right? So my news, my pages, my lists, my libraries, everything is going to be modern. How do you stitch these different experiences together to where from an end user, you feel like you're still part of the intranet environment or the intranet portal? So the key piece is, and again, this is where I really kind of leverage some smoke and mirrors, is that now I can go to Deshaun intranet, right, or the DI intranet here. Let's go back to this main homepage, grab this URL, and now I can create a simple navigation entry. Just call it intranet home, right? Or whatever the name of your intranet is going to be. And then I go ahead and paste that in. Now this may be a little bit different, right? Because now I have this DC Digital and I have this intranet home, and these could be conflicting a little bit, right? So this is where your hub settings come into play. So in my hub settings, if I want, I can remove this and say, don't show my hub entry in the navigation. And now everything would start with intranet home. So if I go to intranet home, I can go ahead and, or actually, let's just do this. Let's just call this, to be consistent, Deshaun intranet, right? Because now from an end user perspective, so if I click on this link, Deshaun intranet, I have a Deshaun intranet here, and then, you know, it feels natural. Even though my experience flashed a little bit, my navigation is consistent, and especially with this link, my navigation is going to be consistent. And from an end user, I don't feel like I'm confused. Now, the other thing I probably want to do is a Deshaun Digital. So let's just go ahead and create a digital entry point here, right? Go back to my intranet hub, create another digital entry point here, remove that test link. And now just like that, I can toggle easily between the two hubs. And again, my experience, my themes flashes and that changes, but I feel like I'm not out in the wild, and I have that North Star, that Deshaun intranet, that would drop me into the main intranet portal. Now, this doesn't mean that when I'm on, now this is the digital portal, right? If you're paying attention to the theme, digital has the dark theme, whereas Deshaun intranet has the lighter theme with the orange accent. This doesn't mean that when I'm on digital, I have to mirror the Deshaun intranet hub navigation. From this point forward, I can deviate and build this hub navigation to where it makes sense for digital, right? So I may have a social media section fly out. I may have a email campaign, or drip marketing best practices, or a whole bunch of forms and templates dedicated to intranet, or preferred vendors, or vendor lists, or whatever the digital portal requires. I can go ahead and start stamping out all of those links within digital, and then just as Deshaun intranet would be my North Star. Once I'm on Deshaun intranet, I can now build this. Again, these navigations are independent, right? So I can now use this as an opportunity to build in my other links, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and build out the navigation for marketing, IT, and human resources. Okay, so now that I'm here, you can notice that I have human resources, information technology, marketing, as well as the digital link that we built together. So now if I, as a user, if I navigate to human resources, my local navigation move over here to the left only because I'm using the team template, and I can build this out and have this all human resource centric. Anything that I want to drill in deeper within human resources, I'm using this local navigation here to drive that forward, right? So the 401k plan, the health benefits plan, the dental, the eye, the payroll deduction, XYZ, all the forms, all the templates, policies and procedures, everything that they need within the human resources site, I'm driving them there using this left navigation. This global is really meant to allow me to jump from department to department or section to section, and is cohesive and becomes that North Star to the end user, except for when we go to digital, right? And again, this is the experience of having a multi-hub strategy, and you're trying to do everything digital, right? So I think we are clear on what needs to happen in that for doing a full migration. So this point forward, what I'm doing is creating all the site collections that I need. Then I'm gonna jump into ShareGate, start moving content from on-prem to the cloud. And the content that I'm focusing on, I'm not necessarily interested in moving, especially with a full migration. When I'm start moving for each one of these particular sites, I'm either promoting this sub-site to a modern site collection. And when I do that and get into the guts of those on-prem sites, I'm really not interested in pushing site pages and pages from the pages library. Those will have to be recreated or modernized once they're created, right? And we can talk through that in a later video, like how do you modernize a publishing page to a modern site page, or a publishing news article using the article content type into a modern news article. And all of that's possible, right? The PMP modernization framework is what makes that happen. In the future video, I will make sure that we do a deep dive in that area. Now, what I'm really focused on is, one, breaking up my deep site collection structure into a flat structure. And I'm making sure I get all of my lists, my libraries, everything except for pages, and bringing those over into the new environment in the new structure. And through that migration, I'm very careful to make sure that I maintain the timestamp and I maintain the author when and where possible from on-prem to the cloud. What I do not want to do is to make a 7-year-old document seem brand new because of this migration, and because the created date and the modified date got reset to the date of the migration, because I lose the age of that particular document, list item, so on and so forth. And that's going to be critical, especially when we look at our security and compliance strategy, to where we start setting up retention schedules that says, okay, anything that's not flagged with this particular record, by default, after 7 years, we need to get rid of it, right? If I reset the timeline or the age of a document during this migration, I shoot myself in the foot, and then that retention policy, that security and compliance policy or strategy kind of falls flat because all my data looks new, right? So, and ShareGate does that, and ShareGate is really good with doing that out of the box. You really have to jump through some hoops and reconfigure things for that not to happen naturally. But that's one of the things I'm watching for. Okay, really quick, what does this mean? So you see the full modern strategy. The question is going to be, when I get to hybrid, what does that look like? What does that look like when I'm moving everything from on-prem to the cloud, but in the cloud, I have this fork in the road because everything in this main site collection, I probably cannot modernize for whatever reason. Now, you can do this in many different ways, because it really depends on how do you do that digital divide, right? And I love calling it that. The digital divide, meaning that, okay, this is where I'm going to digitalize and make modern, and this is where I'm going to keep as is. But the benefit, even though I'm keeping it as is, I'm getting it out of our data center. So my SharePoint admins and those who are responsible for the infrastructure and things like that, they get a breath of fresh air because now all of that onus is on Microsoft. So the biggest change that you will have to make is that when you create your site collection, you're going to create a classic site collection. So when I go into create here, you notice that Microsoft is really good with putting these two options front and center, but I want to go down to these other options section. And 9 times out of 10, when I go to that other options section, I'm going to select the publishing portal. Now, you don't have to do this. You can select the other option. I would say would be Teams. I'm a strong component, and I feel strong about this, that Document Center, Enterprise Wiki, and I'm not 100% on what Content Center is. That actually may be a new one. I need to explore that one. But 90% of the time, I would even say 95% of the time, you're going to fall in under a publishing portal or a team site. What's the difference between the two? It's the publishing feature, right? I can make this team site look like a publishing portal by going behind the scenes and activating the right features. But if you're going on-prem, like if you're coming from on-prem to the cloud and the root site or that site collection is a publishing site, enable the publishing portal. If that site that you're doing a lift and shift for is a team site, enable the team site. Even if it's a project site, Document Center, or any one of the other site template types on-prem, you're going to fall in one of those two main categories. If not, I will force it into one of those two main categories just to kind of keep things simple. So I'm going to go ahead and say publishing for our intents and purposes, and I'm going to just go ahead and give this a name. Okay, so a couple of things I want to call out here. One, I am going to call this intranet, right? So this is going to be the mirror of my DI Intranet Modern, and now this is going to be my Intranet Classic, and anything that I want to push over to the Classic site is going to fall within the site collection. You can have one or many Classic site collections. Again, my preference is to minimize that footprint as much as possible. If you can get away with migrating 3 or 4 or 5 on-prem site collections to a single SharePoint Online Classic site collection, that would be the ideal state. Because what we want to do, we want to be able to wrap our hands around this temporary situation. And that's what I'm looking at, this hybrid scenario. Again, hybrid is really meant to, I don't have the time to do this in an incremental fashion, and I have a ton of data to move from on-prem to the cloud, to where I'm going to modernize where I can, but my heavy lift is going to be a lift and shift, and I want to drop that into a small footprint that I can wrap my hands around, and then over time start getting those site collections out of that, or subsites out of that classic site, and then go ahead and move in on with the modern site collect strategy. So this is what I have here. So I have, like, in parentheses classic, and again, that will just let anybody know who's looking at the site title, or even in the URL, I have that CLC in there for classic, that the site that they're on is a classic site. And this is important, especially when you're looking at troubleshooting, because you may encounter a scenario where something doesn't work or something is odd, and that oddity or that issue only resides in the classic site collection. And you just need a quick way to reference and say, oh, you're in the classic site. Okay, I understand the guts are classic, even though it has a modern face. Let's not do this. Or let's say if we can let's build you something modern, brand new, and see if we can replicate the issue. All right, so you may run into issues like that. So here, I'm gonna just go ahead and click finish, and this is gonna go ahead and create. Okay, so, and again, these classic site collections, the same amount of provisioning time that take these things to create on-prem, we got very similar latency what it takes to create these on SharePoint Online. But this is going to be your classic site collection. In the classic site collection, we're going to see the options that we're used to. When you go into site settings, you will see the master page gallery, to where you can come up here and you customize your master page, you customize your page layouts, you create all the content types that you need. You define which master page you want to use for this particular site. Do you want to force that to be the default master page for all your subsites? Again, everything that we're used to with classic site collections will be here. Now, the one thing that we get a lot of feedback on is that you get this mixed mode when you're in this classic site collection, right? Because it starts you down the path that, yep, I'm classic, I'm familiar, this is comfortable to me. Then you get this modern experience and you go to the gear icon and all your options are different, right? So instead of site settings and everything that you expect here, now you have site information, then you have to view all site settings to kind of land back to the area where you want to be. And some of these libraries, when you click on images as an example, this is going to be that modern experience. And then you can force this to be the classic experience by going to library settings and then going down to advanced and then change the experience, the default experience for here and kind of force it to classic or force it to new. And again, these are some of the gotchas that you kind of run into, especially in the classic site, because you feel like you're setting yourself up to go down this classic experience really for the sake of your content managers and your end users, because that may be one of the reasons why you're doing that lift and shift from on-prem to the cloud, because you say, you know what, we're not ready to retrain these people and we don't want to disrupt their process, even though we are moving them from on-prem to the cloud. Once they get to the cloud, if we can have 90% of their process remain intact, especially if they're documented, screenshot, then this is an easy win, a quick win for us to at least get them in the cloud. And now we can circle back and work with this business user to do things using a modern tool set, right? And that's the other thing. When you do this lift and shift, you should only do this lift and shift with the understanding that in your roadmap, you're migrating off of this classic. This is not somewhere where you sit and stay for 5-10 years, because we never know when Microsoft is going to pull the plug and say classic SharePoint is no longer available in Microsoft 365. Or you get that bulletin that says, oh yeah, in 18 months, we're deprecating classic SharePoint, so hire Deshaun, right? So things like that, you just got to be aware of. Now, let me show you a couple of things that you can do to the site collection to kind of maintain that classic experience moving forward. There's a couple of things that you want to do to this site collection. So let me go back to the root of this and drop me here at the main front door, right? One of the things that you do, and we get a lot of feedback on this, is when you're in site settings, go to site collection features, and there's a feature called this one right here, the SharePoint list library experience. If you activate this, what this is going to do, this is going to take modern out of the equation, and for the most part, land you into that classic experience all throughout the site collection. Even your subsites, by default, they will have the classic experience. Now, you notice when we went to site contents, we had the modern experience, and then my gear icon was different and everything was different. It just takes time for your content managers and all that to adjust to that. So because we're doing the lift and shift, and because we are intentional to keep this in classic, go ahead and set that feature, and that will allow that whole experience to remain classic, even on the libraries and some of the utility pages that we use out of the box, like site content, site settings, and all that other stuff, just to make sure we cover. The other thing that you want to do is, for the classic site, is to run this PowerShell script. Now, when it comes to PowerShell, I'm leaning a lot towards the PNP PowerShell module versus the SharePoint Online Microsoft out-of-the-box module for a lot of my PowerShell, only because when you get into some of the tricky edge case scenarios that you need to run through, it's always good to be already familiar with PNP and how that works, to where that's not another thing that you need to learn and get a level set or understanding of before you execute PowerShell. And you will see this a lot when we get into the modernization framework. The modernization framework, where I go from a classic publishing page to a modern page, or a classic publishing news article to a modern article, or even a classic news article that's stored in a list, right? Because we build a lot of customization, a lot of web parts to represent the news. So all of our data was using list data versus pages data, converting that over to modern news articles. All of that is available to us using the PNP modernization framework, which is not available with the out-of-the-box SharePoint Online. So when you start hitting a lot of those edge cases where PNP solved them before Microsoft solved for them, sorry, tongue twister. before Microsoft has solved for them, it's good to already have your PowerShell dev environment, your PowerShell environment tailored to the PnP. Now, here's another thing. It seems like on the surface, like with anything else PowerShell, you can mix and match, right? PowerShell supports many different modules all across the board, even outside of Microsoft. But I ran into issues trying to install both the SharePoint Online module and the PnP module in the same environment. There seemed to be some conflicting underlying pieces that where I almost had to uninstall one to use the other. And again, that's why I really kind of lean towards the PnP piece, just because for the most part, I got full coverage of everything SPO has, plus I have some of the additional pieces that PnP solve for edge case scenarios. I say all that to say, this is going to be a PnP script, very simple script. It has the URL, so actually let me update this because that's the sample. So it's going to have the URL of the site collection that I want to enable scripts for, right? And let's just go, and these custom scripts, or like this script site is turned off. No script site is true by default. And basically what we're doing is turning this off for this particular site collection. And we have a URL to our SharePoint admin site, because you do have to be a SharePoint admin to execute this particular script. And here I'm using web login, which is, again, PnP makes this super easy, because what's going to happen is that I'm going to get a web dialog that says, oh, you may have MFA required to authenticate. So I'm going to put in my credentials, do the MFA two-form factor auth, get through that whole piece, and then it's going to go ahead and execute this. The question is, why do you need this? You're going to be migrating a lot of scenarios from on-prem to the cloud that require script to be enabled, right? And I've seen this one or two ways. I've seen this being turned on only for these edge case scenarios. You don't want to turn it on for the entire tenant. You want to be very cautious and very systematic and very intentional of which site collection you turn these on. So I turn these on for very particular use cases. And in some scenarios, I do the migration and I turn this off, right? So that way it's not an open thing. And if I run into a scenario where a piece of functionality in Classic is not working because I need this enabled, then I document that and then I enable it only for that site collection, but I document why it's enabled in the event if someone does a scan and they'll say, well, why do we have this on? At least it's documented on why that's on. All right. Once you're here, you're golden. I mean, you can now go in and start creating subsites within the site collection. Here, it looks like I need to enable the Teams collaboration features. That way I can create Teams subsites. And then from there, I'm just doing my migration as I have on-prem, right? So I may, this may be HR, this may be marketing. I'm going to do a lift and shift, migrate those as subsites in the new Classic site collection. But the front door, right, this main root, the front door, I'm going to keep that modern. And the way that we handle that, because my front, and again, this is the hybrid strategy I'm referring to, my front door is going to be modern. Again, we want to set the stage and communicate to the organization, this is the new look. Even though I may flash the experience, this is the new look and this is where we're going. And usually 9 times out of 10, you have business users, department site owners, department site heads, division heads knocking on the door. We need to migrate our site because we love the new look and feel, and we love the new experience and what comes along with that. Mobile, interaction, integration with Teams, right? So they love that. So usually you create a demand once you do that. But the front door is always hybrid. The question is, I'm migrating this site collection like for like. What do I do to that root site so where I'm not confusing the users? Because what I want to avoid is someone, and I lost the site, right? What I want to avoid is someone clicking on this logo here to get to the root web and get this, right? I have a modern experience for this. I don't want to show this. And this is an easy solve. So because I'm in modern, a lot of this capability is still available to me. And again, with the Classic, now that I'm in Classic, forgive me, I know I probably use them interchangeably, but you understand the context and you understand if I say modern, I meant Classic and vice versa. Just forgive me for that. But because I'm in Classic, what I have available to me It's my whole arsenal and my whole arsenal of tricks that I have with Classic at my disposal. So here, to do that simple redirect, I'm gonna just go ahead and drop in a script editor web part, and I'm gonna just tattoo a JavaScript redirect, right? Window.location equal and whatever that is. So as soon as they land on this page, they're gonna redirect to the other one. I don't like the out of the box redirect one that we used to have in Classic with the countdown and the timer. I actually want this to be seamless. I want this to, okay, you clicked on the logo here, snap them back to my modern homepage. Use my hub navigation to control where they go from there. If they land in Classic, they're going through that experience. Somehow, if they click the root web of Classic, my redirect's there and snap them back to my modern home. So that's how I solve for that. Now, the other question is, the last piece of this video is incremental. What's the strategy for incremental? Simple. It's the same as modern, right? Modern, we built all of our, we're building everything modern from the ground up. We have our hub networks. I showed you an example of you can have multiple hubs, how you stitch them together. Everything is going to be, incremental is going to be very similar to modern, to where you're building it modern from the ground up and you're handling all your other use cases and modernizing those with the modern tool. The biggest difference between incremental and full modern is incremental is a long play. It's a 12, 18, 24-month project. In some instances, it could be 5 years. We don't know. I mean, organizations move at different paces. You may start on this, something hot and heavy may come down the pipe. This is high priority. Drop whatever you're doing, including your intranet, your cloud migration. We need you guys to focus on this. So that just pushes things out. This is real world, real talk, right? On paper, we plan for 18 months. Reality, maybe 36, because things happen between that time period. But with the incremental, understanding that the way the full migration is done is done big bang, right? We're doing this migration. We're pushing all these sites to the cloud. And before go live, we're going to do an incremental or a delta migration to make sure we have the latest and greatest. But when you come in Monday morning, we're high and flying with modern, right? Incremental, when you come in Monday morning for phase one, you're high and flying with the modern homepage. But my other departments, I'm dripping those in. And then you build up like a migration framework or process that looks something like this. You get an email notification to the site owners. We're migrating your site on Tuesday, April, whatever. Come that time, this is what to expect. We're going to move your site up. We're going to ask you to test and verify. If everything looks good, we're going to do a delta migration, and we're going to remove access to your old site, and you're good to go, right? If you have any issues, send an email to this email address or complete this form. I love the form, right? Because now you can control the information you need to get. You drop them into a SharePoint list, and then you triage, and then you kind of burn through that list, and you can kind of gauge on what the issues are. Whereas if you just send them to an email address, now you got unstructured data all over the place. Someone have to go through and, what's the status of this ticket? What's the status of this issue? What's the status of this issue? You kind of lose that. So I love the form, right? Power App form, do a Power Automate, drop them to a list, and then you got statuses, and you can route to different people, assign to different people, So that's going to be the piece, and that's the framework. Communicate, this is happening. You do your base migration, have them test, everything looks good. You do your delta migration. This is our go live date, right? Kill access on-prem, they're moving on, you move to the next division, right? So, and with that, that's the framework sounds smooth on paper, all the lines align, all the stars align, we got green lights all the way down. But you're going to encounter, the key is, and this is why most of the time you do incremental, there's a lot of custom stuff or hidden things or issues that you're going to run into, or high visible business critical applications that are on-prem that need that white glove approach with moving them to the cloud to make sure they're good to go. And you don't need a time pressure to force you to do things sloppy. You want to make sure that things are done right, the client is right, the business users are good, everyone's happy. You cut the cord, kill online on-prem access, and then they're rolling. a lot of your custom solutions will have to be rewritten. What does that look like? Rewritten in Power Platform or something like that, or rewritten in SPFx, or maybe taking a step back, looking at the requirement of the custom solution and trying to figure out how can we achieve this using the out-of-the-box functionality, right? Because the out-of-the-box functionality in modern is very rich, and sometimes it takes a creative eye to figure out, oh, if I look at this in an abstract way, I can achieve this using this web part, this web part, this web part, layered with this information architecture. I can make this happen. There's a lot of opportunity out there to replace a lot of your custom code on-prem with a lot of those out-of-the-box functionality. And I think that's the next one we're going to tackle in the next video. How do you look at where are some of the common customization patterns used on-prem, and how do you solve for them either using out-of-the-box functionality or even in the Power Platform, or maybe it's not a good fit for SharePoint. Maybe this is Yammer. Maybe it's not SharePoint. Maybe this is Microsoft Teams or something along those lines. All right. And, you know, the last option, right? And I do put this last, where some developers and architects put this first, but my very last option is a custom web part, right? I'm going through all of my checks, all my toll gates here that says, nope, not a good fit. Nope, not a good fit. Oh yeah, I can do that in Power Platform. Let's do that. Or I'm not starting with custom SPFx, right? So let's do a deep dive on that strategy in the next video. But until then, any questions on site structure, any scenarios that you're facing, or any comments or feedback of your experience with migrating from on-prem to the cloud, some of the sticking points, some of the gotchas, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do different? Share those in the comments, because that would be very helpful for me to see, as well as others in the community to see. All right, until then, see you in the comments section, and I'll see you in the next video, and take care.